I'm Gwen from Nile. If you're a developer building SaaS application, you have to find a way to separate data for tenants from each other. Meaning that if customer A logs in, they will see data that belongs to customer A and not customer B. Sounds very basic. Obviously, customers trust you with their data, that it will stay theirs and will not be exposed. But this is not really easy to do, right? One option is to have logic for access controls and rules and who is allowed to see what all over your application. You may end up using third-party library, which has some collection of rules around who is allowed to use what, which may be an improvement, but now you have to maintain this rule set. Or you push it to the database using row-level security, which is great, but again, you have to maintain this collection of policies. It's not easy to debug, it's not easy to maintain, and sometimes, depending on exactly how you do things, it can also cause performance issues. At Nile, we built a serverless Postgres that is built for SaaS applications, and we provide tenant isolation as built-in part of our product without you having to juggle the logic and all the rules and policies. It becomes very straightforward. So in this short video, I want to show you how it works, and you'll see for yourself that it is indeed very straightforward. First of all, let's define what is tenant data isolation. The idea is that if you write a SaaS application and you store data in your database, every tenant has its own data. They count on you, the developer, to make sure that their data remains theirs, private and secure. A user who belongs to a specific tenant can see data for that tenant. A user who does not belong to that tenant will not be able to view data for that tenant. The way tenants in general work in Nile is that Nile provides virtual tenant databases. It looks like every tenant has their own database. You can connect to database that belongs to a specific tenant, and I will show you how in a second. And after you connect to a database that belongs to a specific tenant, every query that you run, every select, every update, every insert will only apply to that specific tenant. You literally cannot get it wrong. You literally cannot leak data between tenants. As we'll also show you, you are still able to have this single database experience that you're used to from Postgres. And if you need to run a query across multiple tenants, usually you do it as a developer, maybe you need some kind of a report, you can still do that. So you can see that things are now much more straightforward than alternative solutions for isolation. As an example, let's take a recruiting SaaS product. Companies sign into my application and they use my product to source candidates. So you have a list of different candidates that you're interested, and you have this one is in this interview, this one passed this interview, this one got an offer, this one accepted an offer. It kind of helps you do some of this tracking. Very useful thing, great idea for SaaS if you are debating what will be your 2024 new company. And you know what? Let's build some tables and see how it will work. Okay, so here I am in my brand new BrightCat database. And the first thing I need, I'm building recruiting and candidate tracking application, is to create a table that will hold all of those candidates. Okay, you can see here that it's candidates table. It has the name of the candidate, the status, resume, which job it applies to, the usual. And then we have foreign keys that connect the tenant ID from this table to the tenants table. This is pretty important. Why is it so important? Well, if you think about it, every one of those candidates in the table is a candidate for a job in a specific company. Companies definitely don't want their candidate list to leak to each other. Recruiting is very competitive. we definitely don't want other companies to know about the star engineers that we really want to hire, and definitely not how much money we are offering them. So we need to isolate the candidates for one company from the other. So obviously we need to know which tenant every candidate belongs to, hence the tenant ID. And Nile enforces that the tenant ID that you introduce actually exists. When you insert a new candidate, it will make sure that this candidate is inserted into the virtual tenant database of the correct tenant. Let's create this table, and create it successfully. Now, in order to show you how it works, I need to create a few tenants. So let's create a few tenants. I'm going to keep it simple. They're going to be called customers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No. Okay, so I have two insert commands. One inserts candidates for customer 1 and the other inserts some candidates for customer 2. Okay, so we successfully inserted 5 rows, and if we take a look at the candidate table, okay, and you can see all 5 candidates listed here. Now you may think, hey, I can see all 5 candidates belonging to all 2 tenants. This doesn't look very tenant isolated. This doesn't look like I have virtual tenant databases. Gwen, what are you talking about? But it is useful that you as a developer can connect to Postgres and act as if it's a single Postgres database, and that Nile allows you to see all the data for all your tenants. If you need to debug anything, you want to have this capability. But when you're actually writing your application, you want the opposite. You want to have the user log in, and once the user logins, you want to know which tenant the user belongs to, and then you want to always show this user data for just one tenant. So the way you do it when you're using Postgres client or an ORM that uses a Postgres driver behind the scenes is that you want, after you're connecting to Nile, to say which tenant ID you're currently going to work on. So it looks something like this. So over here, I'm saying, okay, I want to route my connection to the specific tenant database for this tenant. It happened to be tenant 1. And then I want to select star from candidates. Now what will happen? Now I see only 2, because tenant 1 only has 2 candidates. So this is what the virtual tenant databases provide you. This is what isolation looks like. So the important thing when you're using a Postgres client or ORM or a driver is to make sure that whenever you get a new connection, make sure that you're setting the Nile tenant ID to the correct tenant ID that is relevant to the request that you just got and you're trying to handle. So we have entire tutorials on how to do this in different languages, different ORMs, but this is a key point. If you want to enjoy tenant isolation, you need to tell the Postgres driver, we are now connecting to this tenant database. You can go to our examples and templates and find all the ways you can do it using different drivers, different ORMs, different languages. If you're using TypeScript, you have the option of using Nile SDK. And Nile SDK also have its own Nile connection pooler. And this connection pooler is obviously very aware of tenants, and it allows you to talk to Nile both as a database and to the APIs, and you basically ask it for a connection to a specific tenant database, you get it, and as long as you have this connection, you know that you're connecting to that specific tenant. So it makes things a bit nicer, as you can see in this 5-line snippet. Okay, so we've shown you how to run an isolated query on isolated data that belongs to just one tenant in their virtual tenant database. Because Nile has been talking a lot about tenants and these tenant isolation capabilities, A lot of developers who come to us actually ask the opposite. Is it possible to run analytical queries on multiple tenants at the same time? Now, if you're kind of a mature company, you may say, Gwen, I would never run analytical queries on my production database. We'll have an ETL getting the data to Snowflake or BigQuery or one of those, and then I'll run my analytical queries on one of those databases that are more intended for analytical use cases. But if you're a startup, between us, you will probably do everything in your Postgres. Postgres is a very capable database. You will be able to get a lot of mileage out of it before you need to start building those ETL processes. And as startups, we enjoy every bit of time saving you can get. So simple startup-y questions like, how many customers do I have, are very easy to answer with Nile. Created 5. I hope I have 5. Yep, I have 5 customers. This is very easy, and everyone always wants to check many customers they have. You may also want to know how many candidates each of my customers have. So let's generate this list. Okay, so you can see that the first 2 customers have some candidates, the rest don't, which makes sense. This is data effect. And this is very useful information for customer success teams for obvious reasons. You know who are your best customers, you know who is struggling. You can do a lot of things with this kind of information. And you may also want customers who got at least 1 candidate in the last 30 days. This would be our active monthly users. And this is, again, a statistic that every SaaS company needs to show on a regular basis. Nobody. Let me look farther back. I had some active customers in the last year, but not any time recently. My small example SaaS product may be in trouble. Where we've explored tenant isolation a bit, and we've also shown you that while tenant isolation is extremely useful while you're building your application and saves you a lot of time and effort, you are not locked into this isolated model. You also have everyone is in one perfectly normal Postgres database, and you can run those analytical queries with no problems at all. So go ahead, build your SaaS startup and join our Discord and let us know how it went.